Afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Kyle Mox. I'm Associate Dean for National Scholarships at Arizona State University, and I am the campus representative for the Goldwater Scholarship, and as well the Director of the Office of National Scholarships Advisement. So all kinds of titles. Today, we're going to be focused in on the Goldwater Scholarship, the nation's premier award for undergraduates in STEM disciplines. Give you an idea of what the eligibility and selection criteria are like, what makes for a good candidate, preview the award application timeline, and save plenty of time for you to ask all the questions you would like. If you haven't interacted with our office before, might be useful to get a definition of what a national scholarship actually is. This is separate from the type of scholarship you might have to help pay for your tuition at ASU. A lot of times, the way that we frame it is that, well, if you need money right now, these aren't going to be very helpful, right? These are external awards, meaning they are sponsored by government agencies, of foreign governments, philanthropic organizations, nonprofits, all range of different award sponsors. And because they're external to ASU, it means that thousands of other people can also apply to these awards. So hence the national or sometimes even international. They vary in terms of who's eligible for them. They vary in terms of award benefits and selection criteria, and there's literally hundreds of different national scholarships. You can read about several of them on our website. But because they're so large and because they're so valuable, the selection rates tend to be pretty low, which means they're prestigious. And so the nice thing about winning an award with a 4 or 5% selection rate is that's resume worthy, right? And it's a great way to showcase your credentials. So for all those reasons, ASU thinks it's a valuable investment of their time and energy to provide advising for these types of things because the process itself is so clarifying, but also it's a really great way to showcase to the rest of the world that, hey, ASU students perform at the same level of students anywhere in the world, right? So, and many of these fellowship opportunities we do. So in terms of resources, obviously webinars, you know that because you're here, but we provide a lot of info sessions. We also provide a lot of guidance, workshops, and throughout the month of October, we'll be doing Fellowships Fridays talking about the use of AI in fellowships application processes. So we do a lot of more instructional things like that, even curriculum and credit-bearing classes. Writing instructions. So if you proceed in this application, you'll be doing a lot of work with me to revise and edit your applications. And then we also coordinate the campus committees for awards like Goldwater that require nomination. So in case you didn't know, Barry Goldwater was one of the first two U.S. senators from the great state of Arizona, and which is why everything around us is often named Goldwater. There's a Goldwater building on campus. There's a Goldwater terminal at the airport. There's a Goldwater room that has a bunch of his photography at the MU. And there's a scholarship, right? And so the concept of the scholarship was to honor Senator Goldwater's lifelong service to this country, both through the military and through his political career. And they decided that the focus of it was to promote high-level STEM research in the United States to help us maintain our competitive edge. And so very cool, right? Instead of a building or a plaque somewhere, Senator Goldwater gets this fellowship program. And if you actually go to the Wall of Fame, second floor of Honors Hall, and look at the Goldwater section, you'll see in the top left, a few of our oldest winners in the first couple classes actually got to take their pictures with Senator Goldwater. So kind of interesting. Other fun fact, among the major nominated federal fellowships, two of them are named after Arizonans. There's the Udall Scholarship, who was a congressional representative, and Senator Goldwater. I think that's kind of cool. Not a lot of states get to brag on that. So what do you get? So the Goldwater Scholarship provides up to $7,500 towards educational costs. And that includes everything that you think it would, tuition, fees, housing, room and board, things like that. The greater benefit of the Goldwater Scholarship, though, is the acclaim that you get from being selected. There have been instances where Goldwater scholars I've worked with did not even claim all or any of the financial benefit that they received because they were already generously funded through other merit scholarships. So they will provide up to $7,500 in what they call a last dollar amount, meaning after all your other aid has been applied, all the other merit aid anyway, whatever is remaining, they'll cover with the scholarship amount. You get access to a professional network. You become part of the Goldwater Alumni Network, which has a lot of professional development opportunities, opportunities for research, connection with alumni. They've just launched in the last couple of years a Goldwater Scholar podcast, and they have, like I said, their own email listserv, which is really bursting with great opportunities. So, in terms of eligibility, you do need to be a sophomore or junior, and they define that by time until graduation. So many of you might be coming in with AP or dual credit, say, well, I'm a junior by standing. This is my first year. Can I apply? What matters is how long until you plan to graduate from ASU with your bachelor's degree. And so if you have 1 year of full-time study remaining after this year, then you would be a junior. If you have 2 years of study remaining after this current year, then you would be a sophomore. If you have more or less than that, then you would be not a sophomore or a junior. If you're in a +1 program, that definition gets a little complicated, and we can deal with that in a one-on-one conversation. You have to want to be pursuing a research career in math, natural sciences, or engineering. So anything adjacent to that, NSF definitions, for instance, are a little broader than that, but for Goldwater, it's squarely in natural sciences, engineering, mathematics. And so you have to intend to pursue a PhD. It's strongly preferred, but I'll be honest, I've been doing Goldwater over 20 years. I've never had anyone win that wasn't planning to pursue a PhD. The published criteria say 3.0 GPA. That's the 1980s criteria. They haven't updated it because that would require a congressional act. In practice, that's usually at the upper end, right? It's gotten competitive enough where for ASU applicants, we'd want to see you in the 3.8, 3.9, 4.0 range, unweighted, right? Taking out those A pluses. It is open only to U.S. citizens or permanent residents. This is a .gov. This is a independent federal agency. It is taxpayer funded and donor funded, so it's only open to U.S. citizens. And yes, you must be nominated by ASU. And so we'll talk a little bit about that nomination process in a moment. The selection criteria are a little broader, right? So the review process is holistic. It is entirely merit-based. There is no need component considered. What they're looking at is your academic performance, both through your transcripts, but also, what's the distribution of the coursework that you've taken? Are you taking those challenging curriculum? Are you double majoring? Are you combining things in an interesting way? Are you taking the right methods to get into a graduate program, as you said, or are you taking an easier route, right? Research experience for ASU students is a must. And I say for ASU students because the national readers are going to evaluate you on the basis of where you're coming from. So community college students can apply for Goldwater. So their expectations of involvement in undergraduate research would be a little more modest compared to ASU, who they are aware has a great wealth of resources for students to get involved in undergraduate research. So if you haven't yet gotten involved in research, it would be very difficult for you to mount a compelling application for Goldwater. If you know that this is something you would like to do and you haven't yet gotten involved in research, I'm happy to talk through strategies for helping you do that. I list additional recognitions. We have, a large number of students with 4.0 GPAs and really impressive research records. And what tends to separate ones that are more compelling are maybe those that have pushed a little bit beyond that. So maybe they've participated in NSF RUs, or they've gotten part of a NASA space grant, or they've gone on Dodd Rise, and we'll talk more about these in a moment. Or they've been recognized at a national level for some kind of achievement or things like that. Publications, presentations at national conferences, things like that, right? We've gone above and beyond the basic check marks of strong grades, gotten involved in research, and now we're really pushing into this person is going to be a top pick for a great PhD program somewhere. And so, like I said, PhD is really the way to go. MD PhD is also possible, but you would need to justify why you need the medical degree to do what it is you'd like to do. Master's degree students tend not to be as compelling, particularly considering what else is in the applicant pool, right? So if you're not sure, that's fine, right? They're not going to wait 2 or 3 years and see if you started a PhD and then come and ask for the money back, right? But yes, you have to be planning and obviously preparing for a research career, right? They want people that are going into research. Um, Most often that's at, an academic institution. It doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be at a government lab. It could be a think tank, or even an industry. If that was a pure research focus to it. They're not terribly interested in helping, people come up with better flavors for toothpaste at Colgate. They would really like to see people developing better polymers, to put heat dampers on airplane wings or something like that. But right, as long as you're focused on research, it's appropriate for Goldwater. Give you some sense of scale. They estimate around 5,000 applicants per year, and that's really just based on who's opening applications. They don't necessarily know how many of those applications are viable, but there's well over 5,000 applications opened every year. Again, each university is limited to the number of students they can endorse. So ASU, NAU, Stanford, Harvard, Chicago College of Dentistry, all of them can nominate up to four plus two nominees per year. So if you look at the math that way, understanding that 445 institutions nationwide out of the 2,200 institutions in the US nominated 1,350 nominees and 441 scholarships were awarded last year. That seems like pretty good ratio. But then you have to pause and consider that at ASU alone, we see between 12 and 20 applicants per year. So generally speaking, based on our performance, we average 2.4 scholars per year. I know it's hard to be half of a scholar, but what that means is if you are nominated by ASU, you have better than a 50-50 chance of winning a Goldwater scholarship. So the more difficult part of the process, statistically speaking, is actually getting nominated by ASU. And yes, our applicant pools are strong. We have some wonderful opportunities for undergraduate research. We've done well over the years. We are in the top 20 nationwide. And if you take a look at where some of our recent winners have gone, you'll notice we've got a wide range of fields. There is not a particular quota for one type of eligible field over another, but Leslie, who was a scholar in 24, just started her PhD at Harvard. She got both NSF Graduate Research Fellowship and Dodd-Rise. You look down that column, you see a lot of Dodd-Rise. So we'll talk more about that in a second. You see a lot of NSF, right? And that's the top federal award for people in PhD programs, right? But yeah, look at the names of schools: Harvard, Penn, Stanford, Princeton, Cambridge, and now Oxford for Katie. Cornell, MIT twice, Harvard again, Baylor, MD, PhD. Aside from that one school there that's on a little southeast of us, these are all really remarkable schools, right? And so that's the type of student that they're looking for, is students who, with the benefit of things like Goldwater and additional mentoring, can be viable applicants for these top tier PhD programs. So as I mentioned, we can nominate up to 4 students per year, with 2 bonus slots, one for transfer students and one for military veterans. A few years ago, Goldwater recognized that maybe they were overlooking people, or that there were people getting excluded from the process because they didn't have the same sort of typical profile that you would see from a traditional first-time freshman going through undergrad. And so what they decided to do is offer these additional slots. And it's true. We've had some extraordinarily strong transfer applicants that might have gotten overlooked in the past because if you're a transfer student, maybe your letters of recommendation don't have a lot of ASU faculty members just yet. Or maybe you had an interruption in your education and you had to step away from research, right? Same thing goes with veterans. They tend to be older students. They tend to have stepped away from school for a bit. And so this has really turned out well. So technically speaking, we can nominate up to 6, but we can nominate up to 4 students in the traditional manner. Our campus deadline will be 8 a.m. on November 24th. That's the Monday of Thanksgiving week. We have a committee that will then review these applications and then, based on our interpretation of the criteria, identify those 4, 5, or 6 nominees. Again, those nominations are determined by merit alone and really depend on how well you match your profile to the selection preferences for Goldwater. If you want to know more detailed steps, on the Apply tab on our website, which is linked to this QR code here, you can access our full nomination instructions. So step one is go to goldwater.gov and really take a look at the criteria in detail, make sure everything looks right. And then on that website, you can actually complete the pre-application. You don't need to email me to ask if you're competitive and eligible. We can actually do this through the Goldwater site itself. And so if you go there, what you'll see is an apply now link up at top. And so you can log in there, create an account, and fill out a preliminary questionnaire. I've already gotten a few of these, right? And some of the things that start washing people out right away is inappropriate career goals, right? They don't list a research PhD in math, natural sciences, or engineering. The GPA is at the lower end, which is fine. We can unpack that a little bit. I might ask a follow-up question or two. And then listing recommenders. So I've had people listing honors faculty. I've had people listing high school teachers or coaches or things like that. This isn't that kind of scholarship, right? You need to list 3 recommendations that are appropriate for Goldwater, or you're not going to be able to go on to the next round. And we'll talk a bit more about that, what makes an appropriate recommender here in a minute. After you've gotten approval, I've approved your pre-application. I'll invite you in for a meeting if you'd like to talk through the application, or you can just get going. And you'll need to identify 3 to 5 recommendations. Now, the Goldwater itself requires 3 references, and you can do 3, and that's perfectly fine. We invite you to get up to 5 letters of recommendation for the campus committee portion of the process. We started doing that several years ago because, you know, everyone wasn't always a keen judge of who was going to write the strongest letters for them. Some applicants, had a wider range of experiences. And as it turns out, 5 letters really showed us the range of their experiences, and then we could pick the 3 strongest letters from that. Don't feel that you're at a disadvantage if you don't get 5. It's not feasible for everyone. I've had applicants panic about this, and they go and get a 5th letter from their, history professor. And again, not appropriate. You will work closely with a mentor on your research statement. My PhD is in English. If you want to write about James Joyce, I'm happy to help you, but that's not appropriate for Goldwater, right? You need to be working with somebody who does work in your area to draft that research statement. I'm happy to look it over in general, but I cannot evaluate the quality of the science in there, so to speak. I'm an amateur scientist. I take an interest in it. I do well at Jeopardy, but I don't know how material science works in a lot of the things that you all are working on. You can be sending to me drafts of your short essays. However, these are the more biographical essays, the more personal statements are in the application. I'm happy to work with you on those. You'll actually submit your application online via the Goldwater website. And then if you're nominated, we'll make plans to make revisions between the end of the fall term and the end of January when your application is actually due to Goldwater. So, if you get that nomination and you disappear on us and I don't hear from you again, we probably won't continue with that nomination. We'll take the next person on the list. We do expect you to apply committee feedback before the final submission. So I've harped on letters of recommendation quite a bit. And if you've been paying attention, you might wonder why. I think undergraduates, particularly those coming recently from high school, underestimate the value of letters of recommendation in a program like this. To be perfectly frank, if you had to get letters of recommendation for Barrett, for instance, that's largely a checkbox, right? Like, did they get letters? Yes, great. When we get to Goldwater, who's writing the letter and what they say and how they say it matter tremendously, because to be perfectly frank, a lot of the applicants are very evenly matched. So as you're thinking about letters of recommendation, status does matter. In some fellowships, it does not matter that much. You can get a letter from a PhD student or an adjunct instructor or whatever. That's fine. For Goldwater, the reviewers are really looking to see what is the rank of the person writing this letter. They are going to give a lot more credence to a full professor, associate professor, or assistant professor. Now, those are tenure track lines. At ASU, we have far more job titles than that for academic professionals. We can talk about that, but they want this letter to come from somebody who does science for a living, right? Ideally in a research environment. So if they're only instructional faculty, that might not be as strong as somebody who also does research. Many people get letters from research internships. that is fine. We would assume that there is a research scientist who supervised you somewhere in there. Um, I would say the exception to that are many engineering internships where maybe you are also doing management or process or some other systems analysis that doesn't necessarily qualify as research, right? So we can discuss that. Use your best judgment at this point, but I'll certainly coach you in the right direction if it feels like you're not getting the strongest references. They need to come from a relevant field. So if you're applying in chemical engineering and you get a letter from, like, say, your engineering calculus prof, let me get a different example. Like if you're applying in biological or environmental sciences and you're getting a letter from your calculus prof, that could help, right? And it's certainly not going to hurt. It fits, it would work, it would demonstrate your potential here, but it wouldn't be as strong as if you got a letter from somebody in your major, in your field, who has seen research relevant to that. It should be somebody who knows you well, meaning that they would take the time to write a strong letter. They would put some enthusiasm into it. Um, to that end, you know, you say, well, I work in a lab and I don't ever see my PI. I see him at the monthly meetings, and otherwise I've never talked to them. Fine, right? We would suggest that you work with whomever you work with most closely, probably a PhD student, probably a postdoc, or a research scientist or something like that. The person that knows you best can then work with the PI to produce a composite letter that would be signed by the PI, who is probably a tenure track faculty member, but largely written by the person who supervises you on a day-to-day basis. This is how things are typically done in a research group. It's not strange. In terms of approaching, help them help you. Don't just dash off an email and say, can you write me a letter of recommendation, right? You want to approach, ideally in person if you can, unless they don't like that sort of thing. Do you feel you could write me a strong letter of recommendation for the Goldwater Scholarship? And that gives them an opportunity to say no. And I know some people are thinking, why would I want to give them an opportunity to say no? Well, because if they're thinking no, but they say yes, that's not going to be a letter that you want, right? You want to give them plenty of space. Our deadline is November 24th. You've got lots of time between now and then to ask for that letter. 4 to 6 weeks in advance is probably the ideal. We have a memorandum of guidance that you can provide them. So once you're into the process, I'll share that with you. And as I mentioned, up to 5 letters of recommendation. They are sent directly to us in the preliminary stage, not to the online application. The research statement. This is the centerpiece of the application. In the application, you'll detail your research experience. You'll highlight, how any of the research has been disseminated, whether in publication or presentation, and so on. But one of the things that the reviewers really look to is the research statement, because they would like to see some demonstration that you can think like a scientist, right? Are you somebody that's good at going into the lab and doing what you've been asked to do? Or are you somebody who demonstrates initiative and curiosity and has potential to do novel research in the future? So this is a 3-page essay. There's a decent guide to it on the Goldwater site. We also have good resources available on our Canvas, which I can connect you with later. They'd like to know, where are you coming from? What research have you done? From here, where could you go? What would you like to do in the future? So the essay is really a research proposal that outlines future research projects that you'd like to do. Ideally, this would extend from work that you're currently doing or have recently done. As you're talking about your research, you would want to emphasize what you have done individually as opposed to what we have done in the research group. So again, happy to coach you through that. And your best resource here are going to be your research mentors. They know this genre very well. The approach is pretty straightforward, right? You begin by defining a problem in your field. You explain the context for it. You explain, what are the potential solutions? What are the complications that have prevented us from exacting these solutions? And then what is it you propose to do, right? What is it you would like to try in your project? Now, when we begin a research proposal, particularly in the STEM disciplines, we have some expected outcomes, right? We don't just, well, we'll see what happens, right? That's not how we do things. It's certainly not how you win grants. So you propose your plan of research and then walk us through the methodology. How would this look? What steps would you take? What are the different phases of research? What technologies or approaches or theories would you use to execute this? And then, predict the results, talk about outcomes, and then explain relevance to future work. And more importantly, for Goldwater, since this is a federally funded award, they would like to know more of a so what, right? So what benefit to society could this provide? What benefit to your discipline could this provide? What can we do after that we couldn't do before? That sounds intimidating. Don't worry, they're not expecting you to cure cancer in a 3-page essay, but they would like to know how we can solve a particular issue that you've become concerned with. So, I've mentioned a few other acronyms as we're talking through here, and I just wanted to highlight if you're looking for other opportunities to boost both your resume and expand your professional experience, take a look at the NSF REUs, right? These are summer research programs, some of which are at ASU, but there are hundreds of others spread out throughout the United States, and you can actually search through them by discipline, so you can find something connected to your field of study. We've mentioned multiple times Dodd Rise. This is the German government's version of that, right? And so the German Academic Exchange Service actually organizes opportunities for students from the US, UK, Canada, and Ireland to spend the summer in Germany conducting STEM research. So we started promoting this because we started realizing that our poor STEM students didn't get opportunities to go abroad. And so we thought, here is a wonderful chance for that. And as it turned out, ASU students are remarkably well matched for this program. Year before last, we had 33 winners. I don't know what percentage of the overall pool that was, but it was enough, right? This last year, we had just under 20 winners, right? And so we have a very well-designed advising framework for Dodd Rise and dozens of recent winners of this that you can talk to. And so pay attention to your email. We'll be opening up info sessions for Dodd Rise in the near future. Another opportunity that's open right now is the Fulbright Mid-Tex Global Link. This is actually a program of Fulbright Canada, but it's just like the other two. It would be a summer research opportunity where you get matched to a Canadian researcher, and you can reach out to me about more information on that. And then if you'd like to go abroad and learn a critical language at the same time, you can apply for the Boren Scholarship, and you can use that to focus on language study alone in the summer, or if there's a research opportunity abroad that you'd like to do, that could also include language study. You can apply for Boren for that. The thing with Boren is that this is a Department of Defense funded program, and they're looking for people to study critical languages, so meaning not Western European languages. So imagine, for instance, you're a cybersecurity major who would like to pick up Arabic, which makes sense. This would be a great opportunity to do that. Only STEM majors can do summer Borens. Everyone else has to do much longer. Looking ahead, as we think, where do Goldwater scholars go next? Obviously, you saw several students who had gotten NSF Graduate Research Fellowship Program. So NSF, GRFP, it's federal if it's got a great acronym, right? But this is very generous funding to help support people pursuing research, PhDs in NSF supported fields, which includes STEM. The Hertz Foundation Fellowship, which was very much like the NSF, but it's a privately funded foundation that provides a slightly more generous benefit. The Churchill Scholarship, great transitional fellowship, and you can spend 1 year in a research master's degree at Cambridge University, which is actually where Katie spent her first year, but not as a Churchill Scholar. If you're an MD PhD student, we should talk about the NIH OxCam, where you get to split your time between Oxford or Cambridge and the US in your training. And of course, the Marshall and Rhodes Scholarship, which are open field, but we have a tremendous number of STEM students who apply for that. Katie was a Goldwater scholar herself and ended up getting selected for Marshall. Her particular area of focus was water and sanitation engineering. So she did her first year at Cambridge and then has just wrapped up her second year at Oxford. So if you haven't visited the website already, you should. I assume you have if you've showed up at this event, but there you'll find a scholarship database that has descriptions of about 100 other awards. You can see what other events we have coming up, including the Dodd Rise info sessions and the Boren info sessions. And then we have some application guides. This QR code, of course, links to one of those guides that's on our website. You can read our news stories. And if you're not subscribed to the weekly bulletin, I strongly urge you to do so. And that way, every week you'll get an email letting you know about what upcoming deadlines and events are happening. So, all right, let me pause there. Any questions that you all have, you're welcome to pop them in the chat. You're welcome to unmute yourself and just ask anything else that I could answer for your benefit at this time.
You mentioned that we would be evaluated with our transcripts and measures like that. Is there any way that those are ranked depending on the value of the course to your specific major and stuff like that? Like if you have good grades, but in a specific class that is important to your major, you have a
Mhm.
slightly lower grade, does that affect, like, is there a way to either try and present that in a better light, or is
Mhm.
that something that probably shouldn't be thought of as much?
Yeah, no, our committee's quite good at picking that out, right? And so if we have a student say there's a few B's on the transcripts, but they're in human event and, English 101 or something like that, it's not as relevant as if um, you are pulling B's in major specific courses. And, if you are an engineering major in introductory physics and engineering calculus or lower grades, that would be more of a red flag, right? So not necessarily straight A's across the board, but they do take into consideration the courses that are relevant to your major and to your future PhD. Good question. Other questions?
Of the letters of
Mhm.
recommendation, how many would you prefer to be from ASU specific professors versus like outside people?
Yeah, I don't think there's any preference at all. But it would be odd if none of your letters were from an ASU faculty member. And yeah, and absolutely, especially if you've had research experiences at other universities or in other programs over the summer, yeah, those letters can come. Or if you had an ASU faculty member who went somewhere else, that's perfectly fine. There's no requirement that they come from ASU. However, like I said, if none of your letters were from ASU faculty, we would wonder. But I suppose it could happen. I haven't seen it before, but I'm sure it could happen.
You mentioned that having like REU programs was good for diversifying your application.
Hmm.
With letters of recommendation from those REU programs, is it preferred that you get the letter of recommendation, like if you worked in a program, to get it from the program director or the specific PI you worked with while you were within that program, or should you try and get both?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily duplicate letters unless you think they're going to say something radically different from one another. But generally speaking, whoever has the opportunity to say the most about the work that you did. Because really what the readers are looking for is evidence from people that they consider to be peers that this is someone that's going to go on and have a wonderful research career. So typically from the REUs, we see the letters coming from the PIs who are usually directors for the program, but sometimes it's different. But yeah, whoever could write the more in-depth letter. Good questions. Other questions? Yeah, Brianna asks a great question. Since the deadline's before the end of the fall semester, would the committee still consider classes you'd be taking in the future spring semester? So, at the time of application, those courses would appear on your transcript so they could at least see where you're going from here. Um, and your grades for the fall would not have been posted. In the past, when our committee has um, not been able to make a clear-cut decision, they've sometimes asked, could we wait until fall grades are posted to make our decision? Typically, they're making their decisions probably in the last week of classes or during finals week is usually when they're available, right? And so sometimes they're even checking live to see the grades. So sometimes it's a make or break. We have applicants they can't make a decision, and so they wait to see what the fall grades are. But yeah, good question. So Abigail asked, would a letter of recommendation from a current PhD student at ASU that I work with closely be acceptable? So that's one of those cases where I would encourage you in that research group, work with that PhD student to have that letter move up the hierarchy so it's actually sent or signed by the PI. But the letter could probably mostly be the work of the PhD student, right? Um, a letter from a PhD student would not hold a lot of credence in the National Goldwater Review. Um, and so therefore, that's why we would encourage you to do that. If that doesn't happen at the campus level, and let's say that you say, well, I didn't want to mess with that. I just got the letter from the PhD student. Honestly, at the campus level, our committee would say, okay, I'm going to reach out to that PI and see about getting this letter sent in from her, right? And so that's what I would suggest that you do. And if you're uncomfortable with that or not sure how to process, that's something we can talk about in a one-on-one. All spot on questions so far. Any other questions I can answer? All right. Well, if you think of anything you forgot to ask, I'm always just an
Sorry.
email away, kyle.mox@asu.edu. So good. Braden thought of one more.
Yeah, with the sorry, I just was one with the letters of recommendation, are they
Yeah.
known, are they known to you, or are they through a lot? Like, can you look at your letters of rec before you send
No,
them?
no, you'll
Okay.
waive access to your letters of recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. So Abigail also asked, how would you view an online STEM student's competitiveness for the Goldwater Scholarship? Right. Yeah, we are seeing some really strong applicants for a large number of different awards coming from our online student population, particularly our Barrett online students. What would matter most is research, right? I would say the two limitations for online students are engagement in substantial research opportunities and in-depth letters of recommendation. So many of our programs are finding ways around those limitations. I know biology has a lot of great opportunities for online students to be involved in research, or even low residency options for students to come in the summer and do lab work or things like that. So provided that you've got research experience, provided that you got strong letters from relevant folks, and the fact that you're an online student doesn't matter. In fact, to people outside of ASU, they would never even know, right? Because of the way that we the way that we set things up, because we don't distinguish ourselves. Keisha asked, do you require 5 letters for the internal application, or is it 3 letters with 2 optional? Correct, right. And so the minimum is 3, with the other 2 being optional if you'd like to get them. We certainly don't hold it against anyone. In fact, the majority of applicants only get 3. Only a small number of people get more than 3. But again, we've offered that opportunity. Public health students qualify. So a question from Angelica, would public health students qualify? So public health is not a STEM discipline. Public health is related to policy. Public health is related to professional track, right? So this would not be, public health would not be considered a STEM discipline. If an MPH was paired with a PhD in a research discipline or a STEM research discipline, then it would be fine. See, I can't read the room, so I don't know if people are thinking. So, well, good. As I said, feel free to email if you have any other questions, kyle.mox@asu.edu. Really, the best step, people email all the time, say, well, do you think I'm competitive? Fill out the preliminary application on Goldwater, right? That's the first step. Because if you email me to ask and send a resume and ask, that's just what I'm going to do anyway, is send you to the pre-app. And that way everyone follows the same process, and it allows me to keep things organized, right? But hey, thanks for making the time today. As I said, this will be posted to our YouTube page towards the end of the week. Once we get you into the process, we can get you in for advising appointments if you like, get you started on the essays, and I'll get you plugged into our Canvas as well. So thank you all for the time and attention, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.